Hello there, and welcome to our latest edition of Live Music and Me, the music podcast where we get some of our friends to talk about their gig memories. Today's guest is the singer, songwriter, producer, lecturer, and Mr. Pearlfisher himself, David Scott. And I hope you'll enjoy this one. All the best now. Davey, hi there. How you doing, mate?
All good. Nice to see you, Brian.
And you. Are you ready to have a go at Live Music and Me?
I am. I'm
Yeah,
I'm I'm excited about it.
good stuff. How's the old grey matter? Is it
You know, it's
suitably challenged?
as we speak, it's just after the Christmas New Year break, and I've been back at work for a couple of days. I've got brain mush. I'm actually struggling to remember people's names. It's that way you
Yeah.
out of the kind of roll of things. So
Yeah.
so I might be a wee bit kind of monosyllabic, but I'll do my best.
We'll have a go. We'll have a go. Okay, mate. So let's have a start then. The first gig that you went to.
So in preparation for this, I did a bit of thinking about this. So I've got a couple of sort of alleys to take you down here. And it's a lot of people that'll come on your podcast, they'll say things like, the Clash or Sex Pistols or whatever, right? Okay. Not cool enough, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, assuredly not cool enough.
Right.
Um, However, so I've got two things. And the other thing that I did was, nowadays, if you're trying to remember a gig that you went to, you can go and look at the set list. There's various sites online.
Yep.
I was pretty convinced, just even last night, looking down, that these sites are not necessarily complete, because there's some things that I very much remember being to when I was a kid that just are not shown there. So most of the early gigs that I went to were terrible. All right. So
Okay.
so I saw, I mean, and one of those, I almost can't understand why I would go to these things, right? So I saw Eric Clapton,
Hmm.
I think in like 1980. I mean, I cannot stand his records, right? Okay, but I went to see him,
Okay.
and I always remember it was terrible, right?
Where,
Just like
where,
him
where was that,
playing.
David?
I think it was the Odeon in Edinburgh,
Okay.
around about 1980, something like that. I'd be about 16, something like that. And it was, it was playing
Hmm.
blues, like really boring blues songs, right? And he had next to him, he had a table, and he had a pint of beer, right?
Right.
And an ashtray, and he smoked fags all the way through after,
Yeah.
and then play the song.
Yeah.
And I just hated it, right? But anyway, it was one of those things. I suppose somebody convinced me it was a cool thing to go and see, but it really wasn't. I also saw the Shadows, believe it or not. Right?
Pretty cool.
As I say, people come in here and say, "Oh, aye." So, Public Image Limited on the first tour, the Shadows. Uh,
I'm not sure
and
about that. They're pretty cool, the Shadows.
well, it's funny because I was going to say that I think I was taken to see it by friends' parents or something. I think it was the Usher Hall in Edinburgh. That's one that doesn't come up on these various kind of setlist sites.
Right.
And I think I probably was just getting to that stage where I thought, God, that this is just definitely not cool. So I sort of slightly held my nose all the way through it. And it was very British variety,
Hmm.
light entertainment vibe. But see if I could put myself in a time machine and go back. I'd love
Hmm.
to see that show again,
Sure.
because I think, uh, the more the years go on, the more their records seem like really amazing when you
Yeah.
hear them. And Hank Marvin himself and Bruce Welsh as a kind of musician and as a producer and all that sound like really interesting people. And I was a wee bit snotty sitting there, kind of thinking, oh God, you know what I mean? But being brought by somebody's parents, which was such a lovely thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there being a brat about it anyway. Um, but then probably the first eh, big show that I saw that I really wanted to go to and was amazing was Paul McCartney in 1979 at the Apollo.
Ah, right. Okay.
So that was the last Wings tour, and that sort of period of his work.
Hmm.
It's a wee bit kind of underrated, I think. That very towards the end of it, he was
Yeah.
touring an album called Back to the Egg,
Back to the egg. Yeah, that's right.
which
Yep.
I think a lot of people kind of sort of thought wasn't very good, but it is actually very good. It's a
Hmm.
great record, right? Um, and the band was really good. I was 15, I think, and it just was. It was Christmas, 1979. It was two nights at the Apollo he did,
Hmm.
and one of the nights, I'm not sure if it was the night that I was there or not. is where they recorded the live version of Coming Up,
Okay.
which became
Yeah,
the
yeah.
live version a #1 record in America.
That's right.
Right. So there's a 50-50 chance that was my first #1 in America, first and only #1 in America. Because we were there when it took place,
Yeah.
and it was a great show, and he had another record out at the time called Good Night Tonight. Do you remember that record?
I do. Absolutely.
But he should play in all of his live shows now, right?
Yeah.
If he did it, it would destroy audiences. It's such an amazing record,
Hmm.
and he did it with a little beatbox and all that. And it was just an amazing show. So there was those. But what I was going to say, probably
Are
for
these
me,
all your first gigs, David? Yeah.
I, I'm trying. I'm trying. I know that you can only have one first gig.
I guess you can, yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do. And I did say you'd be lucky to keep me at half an hour. But what, what I was going to say, just in
All
terms
good
of
stuff.
first gigs, suppose what's interesting about first gigs is certainly as a musician, they can kind of quite form what you do later on.
Mm.
And most of the most kind of formative first gigs for me were at Falkirk Folk Club and Stirling Folk Club when I was a kid. For my uncle Ian and my Aunt Irene used to take me to the folk club. Used to get up and do a wee floor spot as well as a young guy. Go up and play a couple of songs, and you would just see every week these amazing performers that were on the circuit just going around and playing their songs.
Hmm.
That time it would only be 10 or 12 years removed from the start of the sort of British folk revival with a
Yeah,
big boom in folk clubs in the late 50s and through the 60s. People like Bert Jansch and all that.
sure.
And I think that the experience of seeing people, particularly singing and singing in harmony, that became a really massive influence on me in terms of the work I did, not just in terms of making records, but nowadays when I think about putting a show together, I'm always thinking about the vocals. So
Mm.
so I think it comes right back to that.
Yeah, okay, perfect. That's good. I think that's 4 or 5 first gigs I've got there. Is that right? Excellent. I'll take that. And a wee birdie told me that somewhere in that you were a bit of a girl school budgie fan. Is that not right?
Not a fan. No, were you watching? Were you
Guilty
watching?
pleasure.
Were you watching the Word in Your Ear
I
podcast?
can never disclose my sources.
We had a laugh about that. It's true, not a fan. Um, but it's true. We had a school magazine, and I went
Right.
and did interviews a couple of times, and I'll not repeat the story,
Okay.
but I remember Budgie. That's the thing the thing I remember about that is that they weren't that keen on doing an interview, except the bass player, who I'm guessing was never interviewed, and he talked to us for an hour and a half. Tiffany in Edinburgh. Yeah.
Very good. Excellent. Okay. Right. What about the last gig that you went to?
The last gig I went to was Martin McAloon at the
Okay.
Harbour Arts Centre in Irvine.
Ah, right. Okay.
And I was just so intrigued by this because, I mean, I never saw Prefab Sprout when they were in their pomp. I was on
No.
the same label as them for a while
Yeah.
in the late 1980s. Paddy McAloon is like God to me, right? So
Okay.
he to me is as good as the great folks. He's as good as McCartney and all those. But he's a genius
Okay.
songwriter for me.
Agreed.
And I love almost all of the Prefab Sprout records. And of course, Paddy doesn't or can't play live
Mm.
anymore. He's got some health issues, I think, that make that difficult for
Sure.
him. But then his brother went out and did these shows, and Martin was the bass player in Prefab Sprout, not necessarily the singer, certainly not the writer,
No.
but like so many people who give so much of their life to one project, the guy is clearly still in love with that music and clearly it wanted to share that. So it was a bit of a riot,
Right.
right? I mean, I loved it. I love him and I loved it. He's an extraordinary guitar player.
Okay.
Okay. Quite funny though, because he had four electric guitars, different electric guitars lined up behind him, all of which sounded exactly the same, right? That was so odd.
Yeah.
And his method of doing the set list, because he came on at the start and he said, I've learned about 60 songs. You think, what?
Right.
And he had this. I mean, and I speak as somebody who sweats over every inch of a set list, right? Okay, I never used to, but now it's like
Okay.
set list is a work of art, right?
Yep.
His method for the set list was he had a folder with plastic leaflets, right? And he would finish one song and he would look over and he would go down the list and he'd say, "Oh, I'll do that one now," you know. And he would play "When Love Breaks Down,"
Yeah.
whatever, right? And that was his way. And people were shouting out pretty obscure
Yeah.
prefabs for B sides and say, "Oh, I learned that one," and he went and he played it.
Yeah.
And uh, an artist who has not spent his whole life playing and singing as a
Mm.
front man in a band,
Mm.
so there was something really, really pretty ragged and falling apart about it at times.
Mm.
And when you juxtapose that with how beautiful, polished gems these songs are,
Mm.
it's a really brilliant story there, right? And I think some people in the audience were kind of like, okay. Uh, and others, me, were at times in tears
Yeah.
listening to it because it was so beautiful. And
Yeah.
and as he warmed up, he's singing, and I see actually just seeing from the list of shows that as he went on, he was selling out all these shows. And
Mm.
I hope, yeah, I mean, I hope it's something he continues to do that. That's an important music legacy, I think, the work of Prefab Sprout. I'd like to see more people kind of get it. Anyway, there you go. That was the last gig.
Yeah, and thanks for that because I saw that advertised and I also hesitated about whether I would go. I never saw Prefab Sprout either, so if he does come back, I'd be minded to go and see him now. So because
It's a story.
it's
It's a
close you're going to get,
story
isn't it?
drive.
I think. Yeah.
And it's like often when you see Brian Wilson playing live, to a certain extent, you have to buy the story as
Yeah.
well
Sure.
because he's not David Bowie. He's not going to he's not going to sell that as a big show guy. But you got to know something about the story and understand what the music means.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Okay. Good stuff. What about a bucket gig in the past that you wish you'd been at?
Well, I've only got four. I'm kidding. So I do have a few. I do have a few.
Go
Right.
on then.
I had the. I, I was in London. I can't remember when it was. I'm going to say late 80s, 89, 1991, something like that. Whatever it was I was doing. Um, and I was aware that Laura Nyro was playing at
Okay.
the Union Chapel. And she's a really important artist to me. I should say Nero, actually. That's how you might say the name, but
Okay.
I just know it's Laura Nyro. It sounds so beautiful as well, Laura Nyro. Anyway, but by the by, but I didn't go. And I saw a review of it later on in it was Mojo or Word or whatever the magazine was at the time. And it was Laura with her five or six backing singers in the Union Chapel. And Ricky Ross and I played in the Union Chapel a couple of times, and it's an amazing show to do. It's like and I kick myself for not seeing that. I think that would have
Yeah.
been a special one.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
would I would love to see the Kate Bush before the dawn shows.
Mm.
They were
Me too.
gone before, yeah, practically gone before I knew it was happening. But here's one for you, right? And this is one that I go towards, and I would be surprised if Douglas Stewart didn't agree with this. The more I go on, the more I think my favorite Beatles album is the first Beatles album, Please Please Me. Right?
Okay.
Um, and John Lennon used to talk about how great they were. And he used to say, what we created was fantastic.
Hmm.
And when he said that, he wasn't talking about Revolver. He wasn't talking about Sergeant Pepper. He wasn't talking about putting a sitar on Norwegian Wood, right? He was talking about Hamburg. He was talking about early days in Liverpool and what they were able to create in front of an audience. And
Hmm.
there's a show that's kind of famous in Beatles lore, which is the Litherland Town Hall.
Hmm.
I looked it up. It took place on the 27th of December, 1960, right? And that was when they returned from, I think, their second trip or maybe their first trip to Hamburg. Um, and the legend is that they had really not been anything in Liverpool. Nobody really sort of paid any attention. They couldn't keep a drummer. They
Yeah.
were a bit of a riot, but they came back having played, 7 nights a week sometimes, 3 hour sets followed by another 4 hour set or whatever, and came back and it was like somebody returning from
Mm.
the wilderness and they blew everybody away. And I really would love to be able to see that. You hear a wee bit of it on the Live at the Star Club 62,
Yeah,
which gets a lot of us Beatles fans, and I'm a Beatles fan.
yeah, me
I
too.
think a lot of us are hoping that Peter Jackson might do the same kind of demixing
Yeah.
technology on that so that we hear it a bit better. Because the early Beatles were really, really sensational, and I wish I'd seen that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, they were almost a garage band, weren't they, at the beginning?
Absolutely.
You know, and then they did soften, I guess, as all pop stars
I
do.
mean, you hear it on on those Beatles collections as well,
Mm,
because they do almost just go back into that kind of mode where they're just playing, and
yeah,
it's tons of really cool R&B covers and all that, and some of
yeah,
their own songs. But imagine being in that room where they returned from that, and that was the first kind of vision of them.
yeah. I can imagine it absolutely. And that debut album's outstanding, isn't it?
Oh,
Maybe doesn't quite. They recorded it all in one day, didn't they? So
not quite, but more or less.
yeah,
And
amazing.
it's great George Harrison quote about that. The first album took one day, and then the second one took even longer.
Okay, what about a gig that most surprised you, good or bad?
I'm going to say both of the Todd Rundgren shows that I saw. Okay,
Okay, good,
so
good, or
well,
surprised you good?
the first one is Margaret and Douglas and Norman and I went to see at the ABC in on the south side of Glasgow. Can never remember what it's called. And he was doing his Liars tour. I don't know if you know that album. It's kind of an
No,
electro pop
don't know.
record, which I really, really, really like that
Okay,
record. And the first half an hour of it, you were just thinking, "Oh my God, this is hard go. This is really, really heavy going." And the crowd were, I mean, half asleep. Right.
okay.
It was all stuff from the new album, which, as I say, I love. I thought it was
Mm,
great, but it was almost like he was doing everything he could in his power. And I said to Douglas later on, "You think he actually did that just for the sport of winning the crowd back?" It was like it was like alienating.
yeah,
Let's go on and alienate this audience,
yeah,
okay? And then, just when they think they want to walk out the door,
yeah,
and it was just one victory, and it was "Hello, It's Me," and it was even songs that people didn't necessarily know, but the power of his vocal performance, I mean, it was really great. And
okay.
I would still put it up. I mean, probably out of an hour and a half of a set, probably only really enjoyed the last 40 minutes.
Yeah,
But it was just a piece of kind of theatre.
yeah.
And then a couple of albums later, Margaret and I went to see him in Edinburgh. He was touring an album called, I think it was called Arena.
Mm,
And it was more like a sort of like,
mm,
power pop sort of band. And I just hated it. I just thought this is going to be great. It was like as I say, brilliant musicians. The album itself was pretty straightforward. I thought he's going to just go out and play something really direct, great songs. And it was just guitar solos and blah, blah, blah. I love it. I mean, honestly, I've got a song called Todd is God, right? That's a music, right?
yeah,
Um, and but I just think it's one of the things I I just think generally speaking, if you've got an audience and you've developed it over many years, and modestly from my perspective as well, on a much smaller scale, Todd Rundgren, I have that,
hmm,
and when I go out on the rare occasions I do, should just think better play the stuff that I know people really really love, right? And if you're playing for an hour and a half, an hour and 40 minutes or whatever, you can afford to do that. So just let's just do half an hour worth of stuff that people definitely want to hear. And as long as they know they're getting that and they're happy, you can do what you want in the rest of the show.
yeah.
So I think people will disagree with that. I know, and
Sure, but that's okay, isn't
you
it? You know.
yeah, absolutely. But I
Yeah.
just, those were surprising gigs in that respect. And then the only other really surprising one. Sorry, I know that you need to get through this, right?
It's
But
okay. Take your time.
Gilbert O'Sullivan.
Ah, right.
We went to see Gilbert O'Sullivan when he played at the Royal Concert Hall a while back, Now, this was before his real revival because now people are talking about Gilbert the whole time.
Yeah,
I always loved him as a writer. And Margaret and I went along. It was only sold the concert hall. They only sold the stalls and the very sides, right?
right.
So obviously he wasn't quite coming back yet.
Yeah,
But it was him on a piano, a string quartet, and three vocalists that came on and off. And the first, I'm going to say, the sort of first part of the show was like an art pop show. It
hmm
was like really not, in a way you'd expect, Matrimony and Get Down and all the rest of it, all great songs.
all the classics.
But he
Yeah,
really, really focused on his art pop, you
yep,
know, uh, Houdini says, and all this kind of
yep,
really, really sort of interesting, inspiring stuff. So that was really surprising how brilliant it was.
yeah,
One of the we couldn't stop talking about it for months. Like that was unbelievably good. You
yeah,
know, so yeah. That's another one that I'd like to go back.
yeah. Cracking. I know Bobby Bluebell's a big Gilbert Sullivan fan. He's forever
I know he is.
shouting
Mhm.
about his stuff on Twitter and what have you, and quite right to it. A PS to the Todd Rundgren thing. When I was a bit younger, I thought Todd Rundgren was in Meatloaf's backing band
Well, there's a
because of
guest.
because
Yeah.
of Battle of Hell. Because I'd be about 12 maybe when that came out, so loved the record, still do to a point. But
Mhm.
of course he was all over it, wasn't he? And I
Absolutely.
just thought he was a producer who produced the album, played the guitar, and it was years later when because he fell out of favour a bit really, Todd Rundgren, didn't he? Became a bit uncool and stuff, and then he came back
Yeah,
again. Yeah,
he did exactly. And he was doing all that sort of TR interactive
yeah,
artists and all
yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
really boring stuff that people are not interested in.
yeah,
Just make great records.
exactly,
Stop
yeah,
fanning about. You know what
exactly.
I
Or produce Meatloaf.
mean?
Right. Okay, talked about Margaret there. What about the first gig that you went to with a partner?
First gig I went to with a partner was Joni Mitchell
Ah,
in the
okay.
Edinburgh Playhouse. I'm going to say 1983.
Well, okay.
And she was on her Wild Things Run Fast
Yep.
tour. It's not a brilliant album, that. The songs are brilliant. And she saved some of those songs later on. She did quite a lot of them on the album Travelogue with a
Redone them. Yeah.
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 Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of realize how great they were. But the show was great. I mean, and I mean it was Joni. I was on a student grant at the time, and after that show, I spent all of my student grant, I mean all of it, on all of her.
Wow.
Right. I was lucky. My mum and dad were kind of like, okay,
And
fine.
and did your student grant pay for your partner's ticket as well to go to the gig?
Probably.
Probably. Yeah.
But the thing is, and here's the thing, and I tell the story, and I don't tell to be unkind to that person who shall remain nameless, but he fell asleep during the show. I was like,
Very good.
15 quid.
I
But it was a
know.
great show. And at the end of the show, she came down to the front apron of the stage
Yep.
and she sang Woodstock. It's not my favorite Joni Mitchell song, but in that moment,
Yeah.
someone coming down off mic in the Playhouse
Yeah.
in Edinburgh and sang Woodstock. It was something else.
Plus, it's an iconic song, isn't it? So just the kind of memories and
Oh,
stuff, I guess it brings
oh,
back. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, fantastic. Okay, what about a sort of great stroke famous gig that you had a ticket to but never got to? You mentioned Laura Nero earlier on there.
Well, I've actually no answer to this. I
Okay,
have
cool.
I have searched my mind. You'll be delighted to hear.
That's good.
Get a few minutes
That's
back.
okay.
Uh,
I can.
Yeah,
What
honestly cannot remember that ever happening.
any gig that you missed the last bus or train home?
Well, not not strictly, but I'll give you this one, and this is true.
Okay,
Uh, One of my favorite artists of the past, 10 years or whatever, are Milk Carton Kids. Do
okay,
you know Milk Carton
I do.
Kids?
Yep.
Um, and actually, I saw them at 2 o'clock in the morning in a hotel room in Toronto.
Right. Okay. I'm going to ask, aren't
Yeah. So
what's
it
the
was
what's the context to that?
it was International Folk Alliance, and it was the Chelsea Delta Chelsea and in downtown in Toronto.
Okay.
And I was there on behalf of UWS, University of West Scotland. Um, and there was some talk at the time of us getting involved in International Folk Alliance, which never quite happened. But anyway, so what happens in that thing is that the independent labels and artists for the duration of that event take rooms. The Delta in Toronto, I think, used to give them the top 5 floors. I mean, of course, it is like 25 tellers them, give them the top 5 floors, and each room is a venue, right?
Right.
So you can, if you're so inclined, and people do spend all night going around watching shows and buying merch and all the rest of it. And I saw the first night I was there, I stumbled on 2 or 3 things. One of which was, as I say, about 2 o'clock in the morning, milk carton kids in what can only be described as a single room. And right, and I
Okay.
mean there were probably 4 or 5 people there, and I thought, oh my God,
Wow.
this is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I sussed that they were funny. They played the following night in one of the corner suites, and it was I'm trying to remember what the label was, maybe Dee's Lonely or whatever they're called,
Yeah.
and they had a label sort of showcase in one of the bigger rooms, and they had some free beer and all the rest of it. And I went and saw them again, and then later on, I saw them when they came to Glasgow. But that's not quite an answer to your question. But 2 o'clock in the morning in a
Yeah.
hotel room that
Yeah.
holds 5 people in Toronto, I'll
I'll
give you
take
that.
that. I'll take that.
Yeah,
I mean, they played that corner room. That was like a stadium tour then, was it? When they moved to the big corner room and
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
right?
it was.
Yeah.
It was like that, like a headline show.
Yeah, you were there at the beginning, weren't you?
And there were,
Yeah.
yeah, and there were like 25 people in it, like, crammed like this.
Excellent. What about the best support act that you've ever seen?
So I scratched my head about this when I'll go back to the Paul McCartney
Hmm.
show in 1979. He was supported by a guy called Earl Oaken. Have you ever heard of Earl Oaken?
No.
So Earl Oaken was a songwriter uh, who wrote, I think he was on the Brian Epstein sort of roster
Okay.
in the mid to late 60s. And he wrote a song for Cilla Black, and he wrote a couple other things like that. He's a really odd performer.
Hmm.
He wears spats, right?
Okay.
And a wee bowler hat, and he
Yeah.
plays an nylon strung guitar, and he does mouth trumpet.
Okay. You're building us up here, David.
Oh, it gets better. And he tells these wee jokes about how he knows he doesn't look like a rock star, but he is actually a sort of,
Yeah.
pulsating rock star and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
He did that in front of how many people did the Apollo hold?
3,500.
3,500
Yeah.
Glaswegians who were waiting for Paul McCartney. And I mean, it was just what an act of bravery. I mean,
Uh-huh.
and people, people in Glasgow are shouting it. Yeah,
Mm.
it's like, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
He was, to me, I was only 15 at the time,
Yeah.
but I thought this guy is amazing. And he is one of the greatest singers I've ever heard. He's a beautiful, beautiful singer.
Yeah.
Slightly reminds me a wee bit of Norman Blake or even Frank Reader.
Okay.
And funny, Frank and I have just done a version of one of Earl's songs. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but there is a yeah. So that was it. I suppose the thing was, Brian. It was the sense that you think you see somebody and they just do something really, really brave. Now,
Yeah.
I've criticised Todd Rundgren already for not giving the crowd what they want, but this is a different thing. It's a support artist going to open for one of the Beatles, right? And doing mouth trumpet and sort of like niche jokes about how he looks like a pop star and doing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was just beautiful. And then the
Yeah.
only other one that I would say, and this is about a group that opened for the Pearlfishers when they were just that. It's a group called Swiss Family Orbison,
I've
who went
heard of
on
them.
to make a
Yeah.
couple of really good records.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Kit Clark and Keith Matheson, who later came and joined the Pearlfishers, and Gregor Phillip. And they did, I think, maybe 3 or 4 shows when we were on tour and came out and did it. And I mean, it's probably the only time we went out and watched them every night because they were just so
Mm.
great vocals, and it was just, I think two guitars, and three vocals, and brilliant.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. I love that Paul McCartney answer. That's fantastic. Earl Oaken, I'm going to go and check him out. Love that.
Yeah, he's a really interesting character, Brian. Yeah,
Okay, perfect. Best music festival? Are you a music festival kind of guy?
not
No,
really.
no.
But I have got an answer.
Go on then.
So I think it was not the last Tea in the Park, um, but one of them where Douglas and I went up and watched Rufus Wainwright and then Brian Wilson on the same bill. We
Ah,
drove
well,
all the way up, watched them, and then went home.
yeah,
And that was good. That was like and it was in a tent and all the rest of it.
yeah,
And then maybe some of the times that I've done sort of festivals myself, I always remember the sort of forerunner of Tea in the Park in Scotland was the Fla, and that
yeah,
happened I think
yeah,
1 year
yeah,
only
yeah,
in Glasgow,
yeah, yeah. I
was
remember
it
that.
Glasgow Green, and we were on the same bill as Van Morrison and the Chieftains. And Rory Gallagher as well, and they were interesting for different reasons.
Yeah,
Rory was a poor soul, and he was not in good shape, and
yeah.
I didn't have a chance to really see him. I believe he was an interesting and great artist, but that's not what I saw. On the other hand, Van Morrison, who was a grumpy bastard, but he was
Uh,
he was great, and the Chieftains were great, and that was a great
yeah,
record. And yeah,
yeah.
so you see, but it's not my thing.
No, no,
It's
no. I get that. And we've
yeah,
had a lot of that, David. Yeah, you're right. It isn't lots of people's things. We actually bit the bullet and went to Transmit last summer for the first
right, okay.
time because Pulp were headlining.
Oh yeah, I bet
And
that was good.
we'd made a vow. We were at the last gig they played in Sheffield in 2011, I think it was. And we said if they ever played again, we would go. So you got to kind of blot out the other stuff, really. And
I
we're very lucky because Paul Heaton played in the same day. So we
Great
managed to get
song.
Heaton and Pulp, which was classic. So
And that's it. And I suppose that, yeah. And if, if the weather is tolerable and if there's not people,
yeah.
pissing against you, like, then,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
There's a bit of that, to be fair. I know that they're an acquired taste for sure.
why?
Gig that you've travelled the furthest to get to?
Not done that much of it. And I've
Toronto must be quite far.
Toronto was probably, you know what, I suppose I wasn't traveling for that gig. The
Yeah,
the one that came to mind was when Bruce Springsteen played in Sheffield on his Tunnel of Love tour.
yeah.
And I traveled down for that and I didn't like it.
Okay.
And I love him.
Me too.
But we drove all the way down and all the way back up on the same thing. And it's probably the same thing, Brian. We're talking about festivals. It was in a football stadium.
Yeah.
And you couldn't really hear anything, you couldn't really see anything. And I remember it was shows in two halves. And at the end of the first half, the band were picked up in a minibus. You see the minibus
All
the
right.
minibus coming back. You just thought, oh, this is
Yeah.
the rock and roll dream, and it was just a wee bit. I mean, I think that Tunnel of Love is his best record.
Yeah, it's a great
I,
record.
I
Yeah.
really love that record, but
Fantastic songs.
but yeah, it wasn't worth the trip. I have to say.
Funny,
Sorry, Bruce.
I didn't get to that one, funny enough. And a few people have said that it was a bit of a kind of set piece as well. It wasn't as loose as he would normally play. You know, you talk about set lists, and he literally called it. He did audibles all day, right? But that one was a bit more of a sort of performance, I think. And he didn't then play for quite a long time with these for
I
I think, a dozen years or something after that. So
yeah.
I'm
I'd
still
love
going
to.
to
I
see
mean,
him
I'd
these
love
days.
to
So
see. Oh, I'd love to see him at his best. I really would. And I mean, as I said,
yes, me
love
too.
his record. But it's
Yeah,
just, it was a wee bit of so. I suppose I remember it because it was such a long trip.
yeah,
Sheffield's not easy to get to in a
yeah.
car. Anyway.
We saw him in Rome last summer
Oh,
with the
lucky.
family at Circle Maximo. So
Oh
it
my
was
God.
wonderful. But we're right down the front. You wouldn't want to be 200 yards back because I'd no idea what you'd hear. But
But
yeah, it was fantastic. Right, what we got now? Okay, talking about great artists, bucket gig that you're still hoping to go to.
so I was just back to Joni Mitchell. Did you see the footage from the Newport Folk Festival that she
Yeah, I
did?
did. Yeah,
And I have this little dream that she'll be able to, or Brandy Carlisle will be able
yeah.
to get that together and take. I think that would. I mean, I've watched it a number of times, and particularly her version of Both Sides now that she sings, and it reduces me to tears every
Mm,
time because I love her so much. I mean, get
mm,
emotional talking about it.
mm,
Um, Joni Mitchell's been so important in my life, and just to see her. coming back and singing so beautifully, and the whole song is written on her face. You know, it's
Yeah.
I would love to see that. Anybody that's not seen it should go and look out that Newport Folk
It's
Festival.
wonderful. Yeah, I've also listened to the record a few times.
Mhm.
It's fantastic. And her voice has changed, understandably. But it's been lived in now, hasn't it? And
I
it's
prefer it.
beautiful. Yeah.
As much as I love
Yeah.
Joni, you know, and people talk about Blue, you know, being great, sometimes it just gets on that slight
Mm.
side of shrill for me. I liked it when she started doing, you know, Hikira and
Mm. Mm.
Don Juan's Reckless Daughter and Kissing the Summer Lawns and all that. I like that sort of, you know, when she sort of just took that edge off it a wee bit. And then the Travelogue record
Yeah.
with the orchestra,
Yeah.
I think is really, I love that thing, that low, smoky
Yeah.
sound that she got. I love it, and yeah, and I mean it's even more so now.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, a lot of people hoping you're right. And she maybe gets to Europe and does a couple of shows. Fingers
Oh, wouldn't
crossed.
that be? Yeah.
What about the band or artists that you saw the most?
Well, I never thought I would say this, and so many people who, and I bet you people who love this artist would agree. There's, I never imagined there would be a time when my answer to this question would be Brian Wilson,
Wow. Okay.
because bear in mind this is an artist who was frightened
Mm.
of playing live.
Yeah.
You know, and actually physically incapable at times because he's eating.
Yeah.
Um,
Plus,
and
he
yet,
went off the grid as well, didn't he, for a
uh,
while? You know, he wasn't in a
yeah,
good place at all. You know.
and then came back with this amazing band and started playing shows. And I have to say, and again, I only say this just to illustrate it. I played a small part in bringing him to Glasgow the first time
Right. Yeah.
because the his friend and I suppose somebody who's been in his corner for years, an author called David Leaf,
Right.
who wrote The Beach Boys and the California Myth and made several really interesting films about music, and among them, The Story of Smile. See, David is a Pearlfishers fan, and he and I have been friends through
Okay.
that for years. And when Brian started doing shows, I thought, why is there no Scottish show? And actually, there was no show, announced north of London. I thought, yeah, this could just be a London in and out.
Hmm.
So I phoned Mark Mackey at Regular and said, I take it you'd be interested in a Brian Wilson show? Yes. And then spoke to David Leith, and people were put in touch, and that's how that show
Okay.
came about.
That's
Now, it's
wonderful.
one of the reasons it would have come about anyway. Like, okay, I'm not overclaiming that. I say it because it was for me it was like one of those moments where you thought, wow, I can die happy.
Yeah.
And the show was great, and then after that he just started performing all the time, and
Mm.
he brought Pet Sounds to London. He
You
played
did.
that live, and then the Smile thing, and every other time he's played I thought, oh, could you know, I mean I've probably seen him play about 15 times,
Okay.
and you know, last 2 or 3 times I've probably thought, oh, you know, I'm not bothered going again. I've seen it, and I love him, and he's beautiful and all that. But if he announced the show tomorrow, I'd go.
You go. Of course you would.
I owe so much, and so many musicians owe so much to Brian Wilson, because he not only wrote the book on a lot of what we think are the ways that you arrange music, or even the things that you can write songs about, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of his ability to show vulnerability as a performer, as a writer, and in the way that he's lived his life and spoken about that, inspirational.
Okay. Very good answer. What about a couple of tough ones to finish then? Guys have got a difficult time with this one. The best gig that you've done as a performer and why?
I've got a few. I did a show. I'm going to say in late noughties
Uh-huh.
in Freiburg, right? A place called the Jazz House in Freiburg. And it was organised by a group of guys, lovely friends of mine from that area, who play in a band called The Pleasure. And they're
Okay.
really good. I really like the records. And they were big supporters of the Pearlfishers. And they said, "Oh, you should come to Freiburg and do a show in the Jazz House." And I suppose to illustrate it, it's probably the size of St. Luke's or something like that.
Okay.
And I mean, people, obviously my records have been out in Germany and all that, and there's an audience, but I thought, geez, I've never played there before. I don't know if there's going to be an audience. Anyway, it sold out. And it was the friendliest crowd I have ever encountered in my life. And I did 5 encores.
Wow.
I
Did,
mean,
did
I
you have
mean,
5 encores?
no. I mean, I always listen. I'll be like any performer that tells you they don't build in an encore into their show is a liar, right?
Right. Okay.
Because it's part of the dance.
Yeah.
Okay. Norman Blake, when Norman and I do shows, Norman and I sometimes do this kind of duo show. We did that was another great show that we did a sort of tour in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And we finished off with a lovely show in Hamburg some years ago, which was another highlight. But Norman always says, right, we're going to play the last song, and
Yeah.
then we're going to go off and we're going to pretend that we're not coming back on until you clap, and then we'll come back on. Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice
He
one,
does.
nice one, Norman. Ping! That's the balloon, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I digress. Um, I've just never experienced anything like it.
Five
It's
encores.
like a sort of like mad,
Yeah.
complex practical joke or something. But they literally would not stop shouting, and it was just me. I
Yeah.
was just there
All right.
alone.
So there's no band, right?
And every time we went back to the dressing room, the guys would come and they say, "You got to come back out again."
Yeah.
5 encores. So it was just
That's
one
wonderful.
of the nights, and yeah, it was. I really do. I'll never forget that as long as I live.
No.
It was just, yeah, lovely.
What did you just drop back into your set list, or did you do some covers, or what did you do to fill five
You
gaps?
know, I've I've got tons of songs, so
Right.
I was able to say, I'll play you this one. It might be, might be a bit ropey,
Yeah.
and I think I probably did repeat a couple of songs.
Well, why wouldn't you? See, that's probably where Martin McAloon got it from,
Maybe
calling out all these songs. You see,
calling out these things, yeah, yeah.
he's
Well,
probably at that
yeah, I
at the
know.
gig, right?
Well, I have
Eh,
to say, I mean, again, and we've done some good shows, but that has never.
that's magic. Yeah,
It
very
was.
special. Yeah. Okay, three to finish. Favorite live music venue?
Um, St. Luke's in Glasgow.
Hmm.
Love seeing music there. Saw Scritti Politti there a few years back, just
Yep.
after lockdown. Played the Cuban Psyche thing. It was amazing. I think it's an amazing venue. Played there a couple of times myself.
Yep. Excellent.
Um, uh, I'll also name the 12 Bar in London. Have you ever been to the 12 Bar in
No,
London? I'm not
I
even
haven't.
sure. Okay, so I did a solo show in the 12 Bar in London a few years back. And I went in to drop off my guitar and I was going to go and take a walk around Soho and all that.
Yeah.
And I dropped my guitar and I said to the guy, I said, well, I just put it here in the storeroom. And he said, this is the gig.
Uh,
It's just tiny. And not only
uh,
that, tiny, but it's also got a balcony as well. So when you stand on the stage,
yeah.
well, there, and then there's people out there. That was a great gig though, and Bert Jansch actually did a residency in there. Never saw him there, but apparently
Yeah.
great. And then just to finish it off, another favourite venue is the Grand Old Opry in Glasgow.
Okay.
Played there a couple of times. Last time I played there, I played with Amy Allison.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Amy's
I know of her. Yeah.
record. Okay,
Yeah.
so and Amy and I made a record together called Turn Like the World Is. Anyway, we played there, right? And we were opening for Laura Cantrell. And I mean, it's amazing, that like the seats are like nailed to the floor and all the lights and they're kind of, so and there's a DJ that plays there. I said DJ, and he's like that on the mic before. Right, ladies and
yeah.
gentlemen, shortly, you're going to be in for Laura Cantrell. Last he's come for America to play for you. And Amy and I are standing up on the stage with Stuart Kidd and Keith Martin and Jim Gash and that,
Yeah.
waiting to go and waiting to be announced, right? Amy Allison. And the guy says, but before that, let's have a big warm Grand Old Opry welcome for the lassie that's opening for her.
Ah, that's the best.
I remember Amy going from New York to that. So there you go.
Moment in spotlight. Okay, excellent. Best ever gig.
I'm going to say Burt Bacharach at the Playhouse in Edinburgh.
Okay. When was that?
Well, I
Perfect.
wish I could give you the date, but he played there a couple of times. I'm going to say early part of the 2010s. Okay.
Okay.
I've seen him three times. Once was in the Piazza Napoleone in Lucca in Italy, which was amazing.
Mm.
And then the last time I saw him was at a
The
bandstand
bandstand. Yeah.
in Kelvin Grove, which a lot of people enjoyed. I always enjoyed Bert and his music, but I was sitting next to a lot of people that were obviously on the guest list and talked all the way through it, right?
Ah, yeah.
Which I just, it was horrible.
Yeah.
But the gig in the Playhouse, he had full string section, and it was just, yeah, from start to finish, it was everything that I wanted it to be. You know that way when you go to see a show and you just think,
Yeah.
he played all the songs that I loved. The arrangements were perfect. It was a proper string section,
Okay.
which his music needs.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there were times when I went on tour and just, oh, you can't tour a 14-piece string section or whatever.
No. No.
And, you know, it was maybe strings on a keyboard or whatever. And when you hear the real thing, it was something else. And Douglas was there as well. Douglas and Chloe were
Hmm.
there. Margaret and I were there, and we were all just like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
that was the Burt Bacharach show to end them all, really."
He's a master, isn't he? Really, or was.
Yeah, well, he was, yeah, and remained so up to his
Yeah. Well, what a
last days.
songbook, right? What a songbook
Absolutely.
indeed. Did you like his stuff with Elvis Costello?
I think it's one of his best albums, and I think that the Elvis, both Elvis and he, I think it's a massive peak in both of their
Right.
careers. Right. I
Okay.
tell you, the other Elvis Costello collaboration that I would say is a peak for both artists, the McCartney McManus collaboration.
Okay. Yep.
The there's not just the songs that appeared on McCartney's Flowers in the Dirt and various Elvis Costello albums, So Like Candy and all of that.
Hmm.
They wrote tons of songs. I mean, like 16, 17 songs, and they're all collected on this McCartney Flowers in the Dirt special edition. Somebody should put them out as a stand.
Standalone. Yeah.
It's really great. Anyway, we digress, but you
It's
yeah,
okay. I
that
did
that
ask. So
that yeah, the Costello Bacharach record's
wonderful.
fantastic.
Absolutely wonderful. Okay. And to finish, one live album we should all own a copy of.
So I'll bring this back full circle, all right, to the question you asked earlier on about the gig you wish you had seen.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm going to say that the album everybody should own is Laura Nyro live at the Looms Desire.
Williams Desire.
Since she passed away, as is the way of these things, there have been so many different kind of, live in Japan, live at bloody, round the corner at your auntie.
Grand Opry.
Um, right. Um, but live at Loom Desire is I think really special. It's two shows that are represented on this album from her. She did a couple of Christmas shows at I think the Bottom Line in New York, with just her on a piano and I think six backing singers,
Hmm.
certainly a group of backing singers. And I think Laura can be a wee bit of a hard sell for some people in terms of the records she made, because the complexity and also some of her
Yeah.
slight vocal histrionics and on some of the earlier sort of records, I think some people find off-putting. But when you hear it just with that piano vocal and backing vocal setting, it's really something else. And she, she does. uh, Nobody did cover versions like Laura Nyro. I mean, her cover version album, "Gonna Take a Miracle," is one of the masterpieces of contemporary music, in my view. And on that record, she does things like "Ooh Baby Baby." You know that? Is
Right.
it
Yeah.
a Smokey Robinson song?
Yeah.
And she also does "Dedicated" to the one I love, the John
Okay.
Phillips song.
Yeah.
And it is just one of those. It's a space that you just find yourself in, and I think you find yourself want to stay in. It's full of
Perfect.
absolute just classic songwriting, but also connection with soul, R&B,
Mm,
girl groups. It's just something else.
brilliant. Fantastic. Made a wee note of that one. Great way to finish. I really enjoyed that, David. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.